You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
A very good evening and warm welcome to tonight's Haunted History Show with me, your ever historical host, Penny G. Morgan, here only on Parasearch Radio. Well, tonight we're going to be visiting the amazing Poveglia Island with Jeanette and Pamela of Ghost Followers. Any Ghost Adventures fans out there will probably recognise the name, as it was visited by Zach and Co. in Series 3 of the show, and if I remember rightly, Zach was quite affected by the place. But something, I'm going serious now. This is my serious voice. Something I do want to stress before we start talking about this place is that if you do choose at any time to go on a public investigation to somewhere that is quite hard to gain approval for, I would always advise asking the group for proof that they have gone through the right channels to allow people to be there. There does seem to be an increasing trend for paranormal groups to go abroad for investigations now. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing at all. It's a wonderful opportunity. But it's a lot of money to pay out if it hasn't been organised properly and you're not covered by the liability insurance and whatnot on everything. So always ask for proof that it's been arranged ethically, I suppose, and that you're not going to potentially lose your money, or if something happens, there's no recourse. But anyway, serious Penny aside, let's talk about Poveglia. Well, this tiny little island, that if you look at a picture of it, it's kind of got 3 segments to it, is said to have hosted over 160,000 infected people living out their final days and hours there. So many people passed away or were buried on Poveglia, there are whispers that 50% of the soil contains human remains, or consists, which is even worse, of human remains. Recently, mass graves have been found on the nearby islands of Nuovo and Vecchio, containing the remains of thousands of plague victims. Poveglia itself has yet to be fully investigated. That's a lot of people, isn't it, on such a tiny space? And we'll hear more about how small the space is when we talk to Jeanette and Pamela, so keep that in mind. Poveglia was constructed on a permanent fortification that had been built by the Venetian government previously, and from 1793 to 1814 it was used as what they called a plague quarantine station, or a lazaretto, one of many in the Venetian lagoon. Those 2 islands I mentioned, Nuovo and Vecchio, they were both lazarettos as well. So that's an awful lot of people in that lagoon. The island is actually, though, first mentioned in the chronicles of 421 AD, when people from Padua and Este fled there to escape the barbarian invasions. In the 9th century, the island's population began to grow, and in the following centuries its importance grew steadily until it was governed by a dedicated podesta. In 1379, Venice came under attack from the Genoan fleet, and the people of Poveglia were moved to the, I don't know how to pronounce it, Giudecca, something like that, I don't speak Spanish. I'm fine with Spanish. I can pronounce. This is Italian. It's different. I think that's how you pronounce it. Geodexia, something like that. Anyway, the island remained uninhabited in the subsequent centuries. And in 1527, it was offered to the Camaldolese monks, who actually refused. From 1645 onwards, the Venetian government built 5 octagonal forts to protect and control the entrances to the lagoon, and the Poveglia octagon is one of the 4 that still survive. It's amazing looking. You can't get to look through around it or whatever, but look at some photos of it. It's pretty amazing. As a rough history, in 1922, the existing buildings were converted into an asylum for the mentally ill and for long-term care. This was after the Plague Island, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And it wasn't until 1968, when the hospital was closed, and the island had a few brief other uses, and then was completely abandoned. Interestingly enough, though, in 2014, so 3 years ago, the Italian state auctioned a 99-year lease of Poveglia, which would remain state property to raise revenue, hoping that the buyer would redevelop the hospital into a luxury hotel or something of that kind. The highest bid was from an Italian businessman, Luigi Brugnero, but the lease did not proceed as the project was judged not to meet all the conditions. I don't know many people that would want to stay in a former asylum and Plague Island as a hospital. I suppose there must be some people, probably as paranormal investigators for one, but anyway. Prior to that, the island had been one of these plague islands, one of these places where people with the plague or suspected of the plague was sent to. But why was the Venetian government so scared about plague as a disease that it felt the need to commandeer islands to place people? We have to consider the fact that Venice was actually a port city, which meant merchant ships were visiting constantly. And what do ships carry apart from cargo? And apart from people, any smartasses out there? Well, rats. How many ships had a ship cat? And this was to try and keep the rat population down. And we now know that it was rats that spread various types of plague, and not the bad air that was believed for a very long time. The way to combat this miasmic disease for the plague doctors was to wear those gross long-nose masks. Although the long nose had a purpose other than to look scary, it actually contained sweet-smelling herbs to combat the bad miasma, which was believed to carry the plague. Although, if you remember when we talked about Edinburgh and Mary King's Close, we were talking about the plague doctor there who actually managed to survive. They put it down to good luck, but then they found, when you look at it, he was actually covered top to toe in leather, which meant the fleas that would transmit the plague from the rats couldn't bite him. So these masks didn't really help stopping the plague. If you got bitten, you got bitten. But that's what those plague masks were there for. During the period of 1361 to 1528, there were around 22 instances of plague alone in Venice. But the worst outbreaks in 1576 to 1577, when there were 50,000 deaths, and in 1680, 80,000 deaths, you can perhaps understand when this horrible illness decimated around a third of the population, they wanted to source ways to try and limit the outcome. They couldn't stop themselves being a port town. That was their method of income. So what else do they have to do? Well, thinking that it's the bad smells, the miasma, that causes the plague to transmit, it moves the people away so people can't smell the death. One other belief, and this one's quite an interesting one, or I think it is, in medieval times, was that the purveyors of the plague were in fact vampires. During archaeological excavations of one of Poveglia's neighbouring islands, Nuovo, was the discovery of a female skeleton with a piece of brick wedged in her mouth. Now, the reason for this was that there really was a lack of understanding in how bodies actually decomposed. Some of the diggers of plague pits in the medieval times would discover former corpses whose nails and hair had seemed to continue to grow, which made them believe these people were vampires. The shrouds they would have been buried in had also decayed around the mouth area, due, in actual fact, to the bacteria that we have in our mouths rotting the fabric away. But they believed it was these vampires chewing them away, which gave them the term shroud eaters. The brick was actually placed in their mouth to stop them feeding those from the other plague victims around them in the pits who still had a tiny amount of life left, because that was the belief that vampires would feed on these people to regain their strength and then become full-blown vampires again. It was a commonly held belief that the vampires spread the pestilence to have fresh meat to feast on. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Interesting theory. And this was well before Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was based on Eastern European folklore and some of the stories surrounding Vlad the Impaler, who was actually around after some of these myths as well. So vampirism, vampires, whatever you want to call it, the myth of them have been around a lot longer than Dracula or Vlad the Impaler. During its time as a mental institution, when in 1922 existing buildings on the island were renovated and turned into asylum for the mentally ill, patients started complaining of seeing ghosts and hearing disembodied wailing voices. At the time, these claims were treated as merely the rantings of deranged and insane minds. Not surprisingly, really, when you think about the way mental health was treated sort of 200 years ago, and the fact that they wouldn't have believed that these people would have been hearing voices and everything as part of their illness, perhaps. So their reports of hauntings weren't taken very seriously. But Poveglia's history as a psychiatric hospital contains a good deal of dark folklore surrounding it. It's actually said that one particularly sadistic doctor there began performing what you might call demented experiments on the patients, and was convinced that lobotomies were a sound way to treat and cure whatever was ailing their tortured souls. The doctor allegedly conducted all manner of lobotomies on his unwilling patients, using tools and turn away if you don't want to be grossed out by this, because it's not very pleasant. Tools such as hammers, nails, drills and chisels. It's actually making me shudder at the thought of it. He had very, very little theoretical basis for any of it, and none of it would have been done with any sort of attention to safety, sanitation, and sounds trivial to say that when someone's been using hammers and chisels, but good practice. The doctor is also purportedly meant to have performed other mysterious experiments on patients within the hospital's bell tower. And it was not uncommon for patients to be kept awake at night by the screams of pain and despair emanating from the tower at night, to add to those ghosts that they already heard. Must have been a bit of a living horror, if you ask me, hearing those kind of screams, especially if you weren't ill enough to ignore them, which not everyone in these kind of facilities was. But perhaps the karma bus was rolling on Poveglia, because things did not end well for this good doctor. The story goes that the doctor began to be harassed by ghosts, menacing shadows and strange voices gibbering away in his head. After he was basically being driven completely stark raving mad from the constant phantom assault, it's said that the doctor proceeded to throw himself, or in some accounts was thrown, by some unseen force from the top of the bell tower. The very same bell tower that he had committed his deranged atrocities, and possibly been the reason for the death of who knows how many patients. A nurse, who purportedly witnessed the event, would later claim that the doctor had survived his actual initial fall, but his twisted, broken body had then been encloaked in a mysterious mist as he lay there in agony, which then seemed to very violently choke him to death. Another rumour to do with this evil doctor is that his body was actually bricked up within the walls of the hospital even. We'll have to see if when we speak with Jeanette and Pamela if they picked up anything in the bell tower or what their feeling of the place was, and if this, well, ironically mad doctor still resides. After 1968, as I said earlier, the island was shut and was used for agriculture for a very brief spell, but then was abandoned completely. So, who knows what the next 100 years will bring for Poveglia.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm lucky enough to be joined by our special guests, Jeanette and Pamela of Ghost Followers, who were lucky enough to visit Poveglia recently and have kindly offered to tell us about their experience. Hi ladies, how are you?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
What everyone doesn't know is we've had a bit of a palaver recording this interview. We've been trying to record this since 8 o'clock and I've had to reload systems and everything else. So my poor guests are probably completely fed up with me for calling them on Skype to get it to work, and they even went out and took their dogs out for a walk. So, you know, we're going to give you a good show. So, guys, when did you actually start paranormal investigating, and nosily, why did you start paranormal investigating?
Well, we've both always been interested in ghosts and the paranormal, I think since we were kids, because we're sisters. And then I met Amanda, who's one of the founders of Ghost Followers, years ago, and she was one of my customers, my dog grooming customers, and we used to talk about horror films and the paranormal and all sorts of things, and then she told me about the paranormal investigation she could go on, and I started going along, and so did Pamela.
Yeah, and we just both got very interested in the places we were going to, and it sort of went from there, really. Amanda set up her own company and asked us to join them as investigators.
So we've been doing it ever since. The first one we ever went on, we were hooked.
Right.
And that was really...
And where was the first one?
Newsham Park Hospital in Liverpool.
Yeah, that's on my to-do list to do next year. Is it good? Is it worth it?
Interesting place. Yeah.
Yeah?
It's really, we've been a few times now, and it's one of those places that never gets boring.
Oh wow, okay. Well, if anyone doesn't realise, Jeanette and Pamela are actually sisters, which is probably why they're kind of, I think you can tell talking to them that they're sisters, because you do seem to have a very close bond, the way you're talking, sort of, not for each other, but it's lovely. Okay, so...
Same thing at the same time, so just excuse us if that happens.
That's all right. So where's been your... I mean, you've also been investigating a while now. Where's been your favourite investigation that you've done?
Lancaster Castle is one of our very favourites.
That's quite close to where you live, though, isn't it?
Yes, it's only 6 miles as the crow flies.
Oh, wow, lovely.
About an hour away from me.
Right. And that's, for both of you, is that probably your favourite?
Yeah.
Yes, I would say so.
That and Newsham Park.
Oh, right. I know Lancaster's got, obviously me being a history geek as well, it's got the big links to the Pendle witches, hasn't it, and the trials and all that kind of thing. And I know talking to, my mind's just gone blank, and I know him, the chap who does the Pendle witch, Simon Entwistle. Yeah, he said it's quite an interesting one to investigate, and
it's amazing,
the history of the place. So. He has been trying to cajole me into going up to Lancashire at some point to investigate that as well. But to be honest, I could probably spend 6 months on the road getting around all the places I want to go to. So, yeah. I mean, I've got quite a few down here in the south, but there's quite a lot up north I would like to do at some point in my life. Where would be your dream location? If money was no object, if accessibility, all those kind of things was no object, where would you like to go as a dream?
Waverley Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that goes for both of us.
That's
really.
Both of you.
Yeah, the bucket list at the moment.
Is it? I'm quite good friends with a chap by the name of Christopher St. Booth, and he does a lot of investigations there. In fact, he's a filmmaker as well. And he's done quite a few films that are based on Waverley. And I believe he started, him and he's got he's a twin brother. He's actually from Yorkshire originally, and him and his twin brother were doing a film, and they were using Waverley as their film set, and they had so many weird things happen to them. They decided to then go back and do an actual documentary on the place. He's quite an interesting chap to talk to about it. I interviewed him earlier this year, and we talked about a place called the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles, where that young girl was found in the water tank after she'd gone missing. But he knows Waverley very well. He's filmed a lot of things there. He's an interesting. He did say it's a very interesting place, although, he I think it's like one of those, though. It's got famous because a lot of the TV shows have been there again, and people are breaking into it now to investigate it and stuff, and disrespecting it a little bit. But hopefully that interest will wane, and the respectful investigators will get to go back in. And
the genuine ones.
But no, I can understand you want to. I must admit, with me, it would be some of the old asylums in the US. I would love to go into.
We do have a big long list, actually.
Oh, I do. But I think because in the US you get a lot of these old buildings that are derelict now, or unused anyway. They've not been converted into anything else because they've got the space to do it. They don't need to pull them down. Whereas here, the minute a building's not being used anymore, you've got 12 months and then it's gone, or it's being used for something else, which I sometimes think is a bit of a shame. But no, I would love to visit some of the old asylums and stuff that are in the US, and but I'd want to only go in with 2 or 3 people. I wouldn't want to be with a big group. No. I must admit, I'd want to.
Absolutely, yeah. We'd like to go with our team. That would do.
Yeah. I'm not big nasty to other people, but I'd be quite happy to talk just me and one other person, so that I know if I fell through a floor or something, there'd be someone there to hear me. Yes. But talking about dream locations, if I'm honest, Poveglia is on my wish list. After seeing it on, I think it was Ghost Adventures I first saw it on, and then I started reading up on it. It does really appeal to me.
Yeah.
Why did you guys choose to go there?
It's the same. We both saw it.
She's answering for you.
We both saw it on Ghost Adventures as well.
Oh, right, okay.
The place we saw it. I'd vaguely heard of it before.
Yeah.
We saw it on Ghost Adventures and it took our interest.
Yeah.
And then it was probably a couple of weeks later, we met up with Amber, the co-founder of Ghost Followers, who told us she'd been looking into it and all the fine details, and that we were going there.
So was that a public investigation, or was it just a group?
It was a team investigation the first time. Yeah, first time we went. Yeah.
Because some of the stuff it's meant to be quite hard to get permits to go there, isn't there? Or is it not as hard as?
I think it can be, yeah. But Amanda went through all the proper channels and I think it can be.
Right.
But it's just one of those things. If you're persistent enough and you know the right places to go, then you can get there. So.
No, I mean those sort of islands. I know another one that I would love to do, but not as a big public type thing, but as a private, respectful one, is the one that's off the old leper colony that's off the coast of Corfu.
Oh, right.
It was actually featured in the book The Island by Victoria Hislop.
Oh,
and
right.
it's a genuine place, and it's like with a lot of these things, when they had illnesses they thought could be passed on to other people very easily, they'd try and find these remote little islands so that the water would act as the barrier, which was exactly why obviously Poveglia was used, because it was close enough for them to get to reasonably easily, but far enough away that hopefully the illnesses and stuff didn't travel on the wind. What was the journey like to Poveglia? I mean, what was the journey from the UK to Poveglia? How many sort of stages was it? Was it easy? Was it quite convoluted? Was it?
It was fairly easy, really. It was just we had to go to Manchester to get to the airport, and then to Venice, and then to Poveglia.
Water taxi to Venice,
Right.
And then, yeah.
So how long does it take to get from Venice to the island?
About 20 minutes.
20 minutes or so.
Is that all? Okay.
Yeah, it's not really far at all.
And what's the actual water journey like? Because I've watched videos and it almost looks like you're going through a tiny canal with like trees and stuff, and it's not like big open water from the videos I've looked at.
It might be that it's open water where you the journey to Poveglia itself, but it might be that there's a canal that runs between the main island and what they call burning grounds. You know, there's a bridge.
Right.
That runs through there.
Right.
So you might have seen some footage of some boats going through there. We didn't go through the canal on the boat, but you might have seen some footage of that. That's all I can think.
Because looking at the island, sort of looking at photos of it, it's almost like it's got three different bits, isn't it? It's almost like it's got a little dot bit, then a bigger bit, and then another bit that attaches onto it.
Yeah. The small fortress that was built to protect the islands and the lagoons around it. Okay. And then the main island, and then you've got the burning ground, so it is in three parts.
So the small fortress, I think that was back in the 1300s or something, wasn't it? When Venice was under attack.
Yes,
Genoans or something. Oh right, okay. And
so they built 5 octagons to protect all the entrances to the lagoon, and there's only 4 still standing, and the Poveglia one is one of them.
Ah, okay. And so then you've got the next chunk of it that sort of. I'm looking at a map of it, but you've got, like, say, the dot, and then you've got a big chunk that looks like it's got all the buildings on.
Yes, that's the main
Was
part.
that the main sort of hospital, and when it became an asylum, that was the main area where people lived?
Yes, it was, the mental asylum was there, and the hospital and the asylum. Okay. The bell tower, I think the living quarters for the nurses and stuff. They say there was a prison there.
They do say there was a prison there. Yeah.
Right.
Some say there was, and some say there wasn't, but we think
we did find what looked like cells, the remains of cells, when we were there. Okay. But the building was in decrepidation, and so it was hard to tell really whether they were cells or not. But we pretty much think they were.
There's a chapel as well. Yeah, a chapel, small chapel.
I suppose being a very Catholic country, they would expect there to be some kind of religious sort of sustenance for them. And then looking at the map, I see what you mean about the canal and the little bridge. What was that next plot of land?
That was what they call the burning grounds, where they took the bodies over the bridge onto the grounds and set fire to them, basically. Buried the bodies, and then they burned bodies. Some while they were still alive, when they panicked in the latter part of the plague. Yeah. They panicked and took people over there and just burnt them over on the burning grounds. So you can imagine the fear that they must have felt going over that bridge, knowing that was the last thing they'd ever see. It's quite something.
Okay, well, on that note, we're going to come back to that because I've got a question to ask about the burning grounds then. We're just going to have a quick sort of 30-second break, so if anyone wants to go and get themselves a drink or whatever. But don't go anywhere because we're going to be back and we're going to sort of talk about a few more of the uses of the island. And also we're going to explore this burning ground bit a little bit more from a sort of a factual historical perspective. So don't go anywhere, we'll be back in about 30 seconds.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
And we're back. Just before we took that break, we were talking about if you look at a map of Poveglia Island, you can see it is, as we're talking, it's split into almost 3 chunks. So we've got this smaller bit that on an aerial map obviously looks like a dot, but it was actually, as the guys are telling me, was actually the fortress that was there to protect it from the Genoan fleet and various other attacks that Venice came under. Then you've got the second bit of ground, and it kind of almost looks like an exclamation mark, almost, the island, when you look at it. You've got the second bit of ground that had the buildings on, so it would have had the hospital, we're going to talk about the sort of the mental asylum side of things as well, because there's quite an interesting, I don't know if it's a myth or it's sort of a story about what happened to one of the doctors there. And then you've got the top bit of ground that has the bridge going into it, which was actually the burning ground where they used to burn the bodies, burn the victims of the plague. One of the things I was reading is that there's been so many bodies there, something like over 160,000 people are meant to have come through its doors, if not more, that the ground itself is more ash than mud, so to speak. Can you tell that when you're there? Can you see a difference in the type of the soil?
The soil, it's not like normal soil really. It doesn't look ash, but it's definitely got a different substance to it.
Right.
It's very sort of powdery, gritty.
Right.
You can tell a difference.
Right. And this is that top bit, the bit where the burning ground was. It's different to the rest of the island.
Yes, it is. It's a different feeling as well.
Right.
To be honest, when we first got over to the island, it felt really, really peaceful the first time we went. It's a feeling of peace. When you went over the bridge to the burning grounds, that's when you got this fear, this feeling of fear, and then a sadness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sort of almost a heart pounding as you went over the bridge. Involuntary, really, the feel.
And how big is the island in total? How long would it take you to walk around it?
It's around 18 acres in size.
Okay.
And we were on there for a good few hours.
Yeah. We were, but we went. We managed to get around everything, didn't we?
Yeah.
But even when the second time we went, we found even more, and we thought we'd covered it.
Yeah.
So
we found more buildings and
And this isn't the only island or lazaretto, as they were called, that's actually in the lagoon. There's at least two others, I think Nuovo and Vecchio. I'm probably pronouncing those wrong. Can you see them from the coast?
You can, yes. Not from Venice itself. You can see other islands from Venice, but from Poveglia you can see other islands.
Right.
But I'm not sure what they are, but there's definitely other islands visible.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you started to mention that you get a different vibe depending on where in the island you are. Did you go from the fortress to the main part to the burning grounds, or did you stick to the main part and the burning grounds?
We didn't. You don't step onto the bit where the fortress is, the little square octagon. But yeah, you go. We went all around the main part, and then we went over the bridge to the burning grounds. Yeah. We covered everything. And the buildings are just. It's just the most incredible feeling to be there, to be in those buildings that you've seen on TV, and just exploring was just the most amazing feeling, really. And it was so exciting. But then to go over to the burning grounds, over the bridge, as you're going over the bridge, you just, like I say, it's a different vibe, and you just feel you've got to be really respectful. It's that you think to yourself, how many people died there, and you've just got to be respectful. You just feel like, you can't be, I don't know, we're very professional anyway in what we do, so you've just got to be extra. I walked around by myself for a bit, just apologising to the victims for what happened to them there, and I think we all did our own bit.
We all did our own little bit to be respectful.
So if we start off with the main part where the hospital buildings are, and you say they actually almost had a peaceful feeling to them, do you know when you're there what the buildings were? The buildings that were used for the plague victims the same buildings that were used when it was an asylum, or is there different buildings?
I think they were the same one. There was a hospital there, an asylum. I think they were the same buildings used.
Right.
Yeah, the building was used for the hospital and the asylum.
Yes.
Right. Because when Ghost Adventures did their episode there, and they didn't show it all on the thing, I read about it later, that Zach Bagans got almost possessed, and he got very, very angry with, I think it was Aaron, and he doesn't remember what he said. He just remembered he had to be moved from the building that he was in. And I know there's also tales about, I think it was in the 1920s, when one of the doctors who was running the asylum side of things, he was meant to be, he tortured and killed a lot of his patients. He committed suicide, but there's the whole sort of thing that some people say, well, he didn't actually commit suicide. Some of the spirits took him, like almost possessed him to kill himself because of what he was doing to the patients there. What kind of feelings did you get from the buildings? Were there any particular buildings which made you feel a bit uncomfortable, or were most of them, quite, like you say, quite relaxing, quite almost easygoing? And why do you think that is, that someone like Zach Bagans got affected very badly, but maybe you guys didn't?
I think maybe the fact that there was a particular room we went in the first time where I stepped into and had to step out again because the feeling was just completely different. It was like, oh no, I don't feel I can go in there. Mm-hmm. And then we did all step in there. We all went in there then, and I was okay. I think maybe the fact the Ghost Adventures crew went overnight, and the second time we stayed till it went dark, and we were there for a while, in the dark, and it took take on a whole different feeling in the dark.
Yeah,
right.
A whole atmospheric change, really. And as soon as, there's atmosphere there the whole time, but it does tend to change.
A darker atmosphere.
And did you use any equipment, any digital recorders,
yes,
spirit boxes, anything like that? And what did they produce?
There's a few little. We used a bit of Italian to try and talk to the spirits in Italian. We used an app for that because we thought, they would have been Italian.
Yeah.
So we used the translation application, really. Melmeter, that produced a reading of 300, which we've never had that high on a Melmeter before.
And where was that reading? Which part?
That was in the bell tower part.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the reading to the bell tower where the doctor was alleged to have killed himself.
Yeah.
We used K2 meters in there as well, plus in the building. That room that was in the main hospital, I felt uneasy in. The K2 up to red in there. They work off an electromagnetic field of energy, which spirits are supposed to give off. And you probably know there's no electric at all in that building.
I was going to ask, is there any electricity still running at Poveglia?
Nothing at all, no, nothing at all. So you think if you get electromagnetic energy and you equipment working that well, you think, what is the explanation for that? If it's not paranormal, what is it? If no electric at all that could, and we all have your phones off and things like that. So what could make them react that much?
Yeah. And did you have any mediums there with yourselves, or any of you sensitives could pick up on?
Yeah, there's a couple of us are sensitives. One of our team, she calls herself a developing medium. We think she's a very good medium.
Yeah.
I think she undersells herself a bit. And she did pick up on quite a few things, actually. She picked up on a little boy's spirit.
Right.
And we picked up on a spirit in, again, that room in the main hospital where I felt uneasy. Just seemed to be wanting to be acknowledged more than anything.
Yeah.
You think maybe it was a patient, and then we all got what we think was professing themselves to be the doctor at the end of the night, at the end of the night's investigations, and it wasn't very nice feeling.
No, it was a very dark feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned that the Melmeter went up to 300 when you were in the bell tower. What was its base reading normally when you were walking around?
Normally it was pretty much on zero a lot of the way around.
Right, okay.
It went up to 20 in the room where Jeanette was uneasy.
Yeah.
The rest of the time we got very little from it until we got into this area, and then it was just going off the scale, really.
Right.
Even on the paranormal programs that we've seen, we've never seen them get the Melmeters that high, so it's quite something.
Yeah. No, that's why I asked what maybe the base reading was, because that's another thing of saying there's nothing to be interfering with it for it to. If it was constantly buzzing a bit higher than normal, I would have almost said there was something there interfering with it, and that's why it was.
Yeah.
But the fact that you were having a naught reading most of the time, and the fact it is the bell tower that sort of was getting the massive readings, which, as we know, is where that doctor fell, was pushed, was enticed. Who knows? Nobody knows, but him really. But he is sort of in history is made out to be not a very nice person. If you say that he was trying to he was coming through. Did you have any male members of your team, or were you all women?
No, there was male members.
Yeah.
There were, because that was one of the things that maybe I wondered, that the reason that Baggins got sort of affected so much was he's a man, and maybe patients felt more comfortable with women, which is why they were a bit more laid back with female investigators. I mean, I've experienced that before in some places. They're almost happier to have women investigators than men. Cause
we found that in East Drive.
Really? All right, that's interesting.
Lancaster Castle, we found that as well.
You what, sorry?
We found that in Lancaster Castle as well.
Yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me, the amount of witches that were
in the men's
executed
prison,
there.
Well, the men's prison wing, they preferred the females.
Well, yeah. But no, I just wondered if the reason that you guys felt comfortable on the building part was because you were women and they would have seen you as being carers, as opposed to most of the doctors who would have been men, who were probably the ones who were a bit more heavy-handed, I suppose is a nice way of putting it. So did you get any EVPs or anything on that in that part, or was it more sort of the what your medium was picking up on, what you guys as sensitives were picking up on?
I would say it's more came from ourselves really, and the electromagnetic equipment. Yeah, mostly. I mean, we've not covered all the EVP yet, so we've listened to a lot of it, but we took that much that we've not listened to it all, to be honest.
It takes time, doesn't it, to go through it all?
Yes, it does. That's the trouble. We took a lot of video. Yeah. We didn't pick up anything specific on that,
not really, no, nothing. We did have one point where the video, it was malfunctioning at the same time as somebody's camera was malfunctioning. And the torch was malfunctioning all at the same time.
Really? What was the torch doing? Or what was going on with the equipment?
It just not working really, not coming on.
Fresh batteries.
Brand new batteries, yeah.
Yeah, so something was draining it or playing with it or something maybe.
Yeah, and it's like something didn't want certain parts of the building to be filmed because it would just not work and go all wavy. And then you get to somewhere else and it would work fine.
And did those bits of the building where it was the equipment was malfunctioning, did you feel that you had to get out of there, or was it more of a...
No, it was relatively calm. It was the accommodation where a lot of the workers lived.
All right.
Medium picked up a little boy who was quite happy to be there, really.
And happy for us to be there.
Yeah.
So maybe they were drawing on the energy of the equipment to try and communicate or something. Okay, so that's the nicer bit, even with the bell tower and the nasty doctor and all of those kind of things. Then we go over the bridge.
Yeah.
That takes us to burial site, execution site, however you want to describe it. And you said the feeling changed.
Yeah, when you first got over the bridge, it was like I got to that end of the bridge, and my heart started racing.
Right.
Like, couldn't control it, and I felt this irrational fear.
Right.
And then I walked away from that part and was calm. And then when I walked back to that part again, I got that feeling again. So it was, and I told Pamela, and she said, maybe it's because that's the way people were feeling.
As they went over the bridge.
Yeah, especially if they were still alive and couldn't communicate that they weren't dead.
Yeah.
So were there any sort of scientific experiences, like you're saying, with some of the equipment malfunctioning, the mel meter going amazingly high in the bell tower? Did you have any equipment over there with you, or did you choose not to?
We chose not to.
No.
felt that would be a little bit too much. We would rather just walk around there and get the feeling of it and everything. We didn't really want to use the equipment and do any vigils on the burial site itself. Out of respect, really. I know
that's good.
When you're communicating with spirits in general, in the buildings and everything, but to be on the grounds where, it was a burial site, just didn't feel right to be doing that. So we just explored. We just explored a lot of trees, and it's really nice, actually.
It is. It's a very tranquil feeling, really. You would hope that they would be a little bit more at rest there because of the feeling of the place. Yeah. It's very calm.
But maybe they almost feel that they were taken too soon and left family at home and that kind of, especially those who died actually on the field. Did you have any experiences over there? Did you hear anything? Did your medium go over there? Did they pick up on anything?
I don't think so. I mean, we heard a lot of noises coming from the bushes. I think there's all sorts of creatures over there.
Right.
But as for paranormal experiences, I don't know myself. I don't know about you.
I didn't really know.
And our medium didn't pick up on anything particular over there, as far as we know.
No. Right.
She didn't say, did she?
No.
So no.
So even it's interesting that even though that area is the sort of the scarier area, I can't have a better word to describe it, you had more experiences where the buildings are, where people were being treated, than the area where some of them, their lives did actually end, and their sort of remains are still. It's strange, because this is one of the conversations I have with people about graveyards, that I actually find them quite relaxing. Graveyards.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And they've never bothered me, because I think most people there, they're not reliving what possibly happened to them.
No, that's what, please.
Yeah, exactly. But possibly some of the people who were burnt before they'd actually died, because there was fear of it spreading and all that kind of thing. Maybe they're the ones that are still there, and they're the ones that are trying to be heard for one of a term. But it's just interesting that you had more experiences in the nicer bit of the island. I find that quite an interesting point. But I do understand what you were saying about not taking equipment to that bit, because that it is in effect a graveyard. And I would personally, I would never investigate a graveyard other than walking around it and chatting to the remains. That sounds really weird, doesn't it? But, I do that. So that's about the most you'd get me doing. I would never go in there with my spirit box or my K2 or anything, because they don't need to be woken up. No, let them be.
That's their final resting place, isn't it? And
exactly. The big question, though, would you go back?
Yes.
Oh, there wasn't even a hesitation there.
That wasn't. No, not at all. We feel we've unfinished business there.
Really? So is it on the cards then? You looking to organise another trip back over there?
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But because last time we were there, let's say we went into dark hours, and it started to ramp up. That's when the energy started to ramp up and the activity, because we were getting lots of tapping as well, weren't we?
Yeah.
You're getting lots of what, sorry?
Tapping, intelligent tapping, really.
Okay.
1 or 2 taps for yes, and in relation to what we were asking them, it was tapping once or twice.
Right.
And it felt like it was coming closer to us, if you get my meaning.
Right.
Like something was coming closer to us.
I mean, it could be when you get somewhere that's not been investigated very much, or if at all. It takes a while for the spirits to start to feel comfortable, to trust you. Mm-hmm. So, I know I was talking about the Geoffrey Museum a few weeks ago, and I had my guests on there. It was the first ever investigation at the Geoffrey Museum in London, and if you don't know much, it was a load of almshouses. But it's been turned into like a social history museum. So there's loads of historical artifacts in it. They've basically done, each bit is a living room from a different period in history from about the 1600s onwards. And what was they said as the evening progressed, they started getting more interaction, and they're going back in a couple of months, but the place had never been investigated, so they're hoping when they go back in a couple of months, some of the spirits that seem to be getting a bit more confident with them are like to almost go, oh, it's you again, great, I'll tell you something else this time. So
that's how we feel about Poveglia. We feel that, and then the boat came for us, so we had to leave. He didn't want to hang around there, obviously. So that we had to leave, so we feel like Pamela says, it was getting closer to us, and then we had to go. So we apologised and thanked them for communicating, and we had to go. So it feels like, there's unfinished business there. We do believe that some spirits can remember you. As well, definitely we believe that, in certain places. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. So is it true then what they say, that the locals are terrified of the place?
I've not spoken to that many locals about it, to be honest with you. The man who took us on the boat wouldn't set foot on the island. No. So he'll drop you and he'll come and pick you up, but he won't get out and set foot on the island. So I think there's an element of something. Cause,
I think when they drop kick you out of the boat onto a place, that's normally a sign they don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, he was very accommodating, and he'd hold his hand out to help you on and off the boat, and he can actually remember it being, in use.
Really?
And
when I think it was closed down. Was it late 1960s as an asylum?
About 1968, and it was used.
Yeah, I thought it was late 1960s. Yeah. So wow, that would be an interesting conversation to have with someone.
Yes. Yeah, very. But as I say, he didn't want to step onto the island. So I don't know, but if we go back, we possibly talk to some more of the locals and see what they feel about it.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be, very.
Especially if you find someone who worked there.
Yes. Oh, that would be really good. Yeah, that would be really interesting to hear their stories. Wow. What it was actually like when it was, that'd be something.
Yeah, I mean, that's the historian in me asking things like that, but there's nothing better than getting first-hand accounts of what a place was actually like. Because I know some of the accounts I've read is that when it was an asylum, a lot of the mental health patients would say that they were being haunted, and there was plague victims trying to get them out of their beds, and people were just like, don't be daft, you're mentally ill, you're making it up. But then again, there's also a belief that people who've got mental health issues are actually more open to spirits because they don't have that block in their brain that says, no, you shouldn't be seeing this, you shouldn't be feeling this, therefore ignore it. So it's quite an interesting sort of thing to wonder.
And it makes them more vulnerable, I guess, and when you're more vulnerable, that's when spirits do attach.
Well, it's like with children are so open to it because they've got that vulnerability. So it's an interesting thing to contemplate. But people would automatically say people in a mental institution were just, they were there for a reason, and they're just making it up. They're having hallucinations or whatever you want to call it. Wow.
No, it could be true. I mean, the longer we've been investigating as well, the much more open we've become, more sensitive.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have called ourselves sensitives at the beginning of all this. We'd call ourselves open-minded, but now we know we are sensitive.
Yeah.
Because of the experiences we've had, and not just on Poveglia, but, in many places. And we do seem to be more and more open and accommodating.
So.
Yeah, I think as a sensitive, though, you can go pretty much anywhere and sense stuff. And it's sometimes, for me, it's whether I tell people what I'm sensing or just sort of smile sweetly and communicate with whoever it is who's trying to talk to me in my head, rather than saying to someone, you do know there's someone standing behind you right now, don't you? Because most people don't want to know that.
No, they don't. Or they just say, don't be daft and think you're...
that's actually, that's sometimes, but my mum and dad are good ones at saying that to me, don't be daft, there's nothing going on, until I mention something and they were like, how did you know that? It's been absolutely lovely talking to the both of you. I really enjoyed hearing about Poveglia, and, I can't believe I've got another place I want to go to now that's added to my list. I'm going to have no money.
No, this is it. It's all down to that. We want to do a USA road trip, people.
Oh, don't. I've got a list of places in America I want to go, and doing this sort of show as well, you get to meet a lot of people. I've got international sort of contacts, and they're like, oh yeah, come over, we'll take you there, and I'm just like, yeah, I've got to find 700 quid for the airfare though, so there's certain things stopping me, but it's been absolutely lovely getting to meet you both, and thank you ever so much for taking the time to do this interview. What have Ghost Followers got coming up that what public investigations have you got coming up that people would have a look at?
Pendle event in October. There's we're doing 30 East Drive again next year. Yeah, 1st of June. What's before that?
Nothing in the pipeline at the moment, but looking into various locations at the moment.
So do watch this space, because other things will be coming up.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to have a look, they just need to go on your Facebook page, Ghost Followers, and see what's coming up. Follow you guys. I seem to remember there's some of the Poveglia information on there from your visit.
Yes, there is.
If you go
on the website, ghostfollowers.com, there's the blogs are on there as well. There's the full blogs from Poveglia and all the photographs, and there's photographs on Facebook and everything. You can look at all the photos. It's a rather big album because we've got all the team's collective photographs in one album. So,
and I'm sure you're happy to, if anyone sends a message to the team, you'll be happy to answer any of the questions about any of the photos, any of the experiences, and just talk about it and share your knowledge.
Yeah, sharing experiences. I feel we've only scratched the surface, really. It's
well, there you go. Well, let's face it, you've broken your radio cherry now, so you'll be able to share them on the radio a bit more as well. But thank you ever so much, guys, for being part of this. My name's Penny G. Morgan. This has been Haunted Histories. Don't forget, Parasearch Radio has shows on pretty much every night of the week on a variety of subjects. And you can also listen to old shows as well using the Spreaker app. All of our shows are saved and for you to listen to it at any time. And that just leaves me to say thank you ever so much for listening, everyone. Good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.